listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
And we are live from America and just outside the Matrix. It is time once again for the show that brings you the truth behind the headlines. And there's a lot of truth today amongst the headlines. If you look for it, it's the backstory. I'm investigative journalist Lee Stranahan. We have no fancy feed today, fancy video feed. Sorry about that. For those of you who like the fanciness. But Saul and I, by the way, let's try something for the first time. Rod, are you ready for something?
I'm ready.
Rod, our intrepid producer. Okay, here we go. Let's try this. Saul, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Okay, no, wait, did that go out over the air?
Yes, I'm on air.
Well, you heard him. Okay, look at that. Saul is on the air, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hear it for that. And so we may not have video, but we've got the voice of Saul. So people who thought he was my imaginary friend, ha-ha. He's not that Are you imaginary, Saul?
I don't think so.
It's a little too much hesitance. Yeah, you're supposed to know the answer to that one, by the way. There's Saul, our multifaceted engineer. He and engineer Andre got the Saul link going. So look at that, Rod. We got Saul on. That's nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it's great for the people to hear Saul.
Often discussed, never heard.
That's right.
Yeah, now we talked about the co-host. I think it's a good date. That's what I consider a good date. But do you know who the co-host is today? Rod, do you know this?
Yeah, you said it a little earlier.
Wait, no, but today, the co-host specifically is clips. We've got like 8 million clips. Okay, literally, Saul, tell the people, what have we got, like 7, including the 2 I didn't get to yesterday. I think we've got like 9 clips today. Am I right? 8 million, yeah.
8 million.
Round that off to 9. Let's get the Fauci-Paul ones up first. Let's get ready with that. And then we'll be talking about that and more on the backstory. By the way, we have the great Ted Rall joining us in the first hour. In the second hour, Tyler Nixon will be joining us. And these are 2 guys from the left and the right who always bring it, who say what they think, and you know where they stand, and I love that. And both very nice guys, good to have on the show. So we're excited about that. Now, 202-521-1320 is the number if you want to call, but I'm warning you, I got so many clips. So one of the first things that I want to get to is there was a hearing this morning on the government response to the Omicron variant. And everyone's favorite doctor, the Marcus Welby of tyrants, Dr. Anthony Fauci was up there, and he went at it with Rand Paul, and it led me, Rod, to ask the question on Twitter, and I'm going to ask you the question on Twitter, not on Twitter, I'll ask you right here since we're on the radio. Who is better, do you think? And again, you're somebody, you voted for Donald Trump in both elections, correct?
Just one of them. Just one of them.
Oh, really? You didn't vote for Trump in this last one, or in the first one?
Just because I wasn't home to vote. That's why.
Okay, so you didn't vote for anybody. You didn't vote against him.
No. Yeah, I didn't. And all the mail-in ballots, I didn't get to fill out all 6 of them.
Yeah, so you're the reason he lost, basically, is what you're saying. But okay, don't feel guilty about that, Rod. It's all your fault. But let me ask you this. So you're not a Trump hater, though. Who does a better job of handling the issue of COVID-19? Donald Trump or Rand Paul? And do you think it's even close? Rod, what say you, sir?
No, I think Rand Paul's better at it. He's been obviously more clear on the danger of COVID-19, the danger to children, the danger to young people, and who would be in most danger of this respiratory infection. And so yeah, it'd be Rand Paul.
Okay, so and I agree completely, and I don't think it's even close. And I think if people are going to vote, if the COVID-19 issue is going to be high in voters' minds, Rand Paul trounces Trump, Mr. Warp Speed, right? I would say for most people on the right, Rand Paul should be better. The only reason he's not is they like Trump. There's a cult of personality thing going on. But the first one we're going to run here, Rod, please, Saul, for you, is the Paul versus Fauci one. I named one Fauci versus Paul and one Paul versus Fauci. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Saul? Okay. So this, because there's a reason I want to do them in this order. You've heard these, right, Rod?
Yeah, I heard
these
them.
clips from this morning. These guys don't like each other. Is that fair to say?
No, yeah, they don't like each other at all.
Okay, so first, here's Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky speaking to Dr. Anthony Fauci of the United States, I guess, of the federal government. And I got to say, I think he is calm and rational, although clearly doesn't like what Fauci's doing. But I don't think he's spazzing out. Now, I say this because when we hear Fauci, maybe it's the Italian blood. I don't know. Is that fair to say? By the way, Italian, the reason I say it that way, I was in a grocery store in Topeka, Kansas once, and I heard a guy saying to his wife, "Are we getting the Italian sausage?" And I just couldn't believe I was hearing that. So, it amuses me. But let's first play Rand Paul and his attack, if I can, I'm putting that in quotes. If you could see me on the video, I'd be making air quotes. So just imagine that. Here's Rand Paul's criticism. That's a better word, I think, of Anthony Fauci. Let's play that.
But when the planner is a government official like yourself who rules by mandate, the errors are compounded and become much more harmful. A planner who believes he is the science leads to an arrogance that justifies, in his mind, using government resources to smear and to destroy the reputations of other scientists who disagree with him. In an email exchange with Dr. Collins, you conspire, and I quote here directly from the email, to create a quick and devastating published takedown of 3 prominent epidemiologists from Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford. Apparently, there's a lot of fringe epidemiologists at Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford. And you quote in the email that they, or from Dr. Collins, and you agree that they are fringe. And immediately there's this takedown effort. A published takedown, though, doesn't exactly conjure up the image of a dispassionate scientist. Instead of engaging them on the merits, you and Dr. Collins sought to smear them as fringe and take them down. And not in journals, in lay press. This is not only antithetical to the scientific method, it's the epitome of cheap politics, and it's reprehensible, Dr. Fauci. Do you really think it's appropriate to use your $420,000 salary to attack scientists that disagree with you?
Well, to me, it's not even his salary, but it's his position. And I think Rand Paul's completely right on this. And I think it is disgusting that Anthony Fauci is using his position to attack, epidemiologists on epidemiologist violence is a real plague on our nation, Rod. I'm just saying, when they throw down, epidemiologist rap is another problem. It could be the cause of some of this. But what we're hearing here is, and Rand Paul's completely right, this is not the scientific method. And the way people approach Fauci with a cult of personality mentality that I mentioned before, briefly, that a lot of people have towards Trump, that's the antithesis, if I can say that word, and apparently I just did, literally, if I could pronounce it, is the antithesis of the scientific method. He's completely right. The scientific method is not about, well, you know, Einstein rules, Newton drools. That's right. That's not appropriate. By the way, I'm not sure he actually did drool. But science should be determined by the facts and the scientific method. And Fauci, well, Rand Paul talked about whether Fauci acted dispassionately. Well, Anthony Fauci went to Rand Paul's website. And again, Rand Paul is on the record. He's a senator. He's a politician. And he doesn't like Anthony Fauci. He doesn't agree with him. It's not even that he doesn't like him. I don't know if it's I don't think it's personal. I've never heard anything personal. But he thinks he should be fired. He also thinks he should be prosecuted because Rand Paul believes, and I think there's a strong case to be made for it, that Anthony Fauci lied in front of Congress. Now, Rod, let me ask you, do you think Fauci lied in front of Congress?
Yeah, and he's still lying to this day. As when they asked him about what the gain of function is, he still conflates it and says, well, based on the definition. So yeah, he's still lying. He's still doing the political game. It's in documents. We had Project Veritas released the documents yesterday that the government is well aware of, aware and involved in gain of function research and making viruses more dangerous. And
I'll mention, since you brought up Project Veritas, by the way, we'll get someone from them on soon, too. I will say that part of the reason I think, a friend of mine pointed this out, why the attacks on James O'Keefe have been coming hot and heavy, and we've seen them, right? He's been really attacked recently. Do you know why? In the run-up after the election, James O'Keefe has been pointing out stuff about voting for years. You're aware of the work Project Veritas has done showing the numerous problems in our voting system. And we'll come to that topic in a second. But I think the reason the knives are out for James O'Keefe, in part, is because he's exposed to fraud in the voting system. Right? Because he and the crew at Project Veritas have done an exceptional job of doing that, haven't they, Rod?
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. And I think he's exposed a lot. I mean, he's also exposed CNN and how they do their propaganda. I mean, they had Van Jones on camera talking about, you know, what a nothing burger Russiagate was. So, yeah, I think James O'Keefe has been, he's being attacked because he's right over the target of the propaganda coming out of the establishment left.
And when I say attacked, I mean his apartment raided, Roger Stone style. Not that Roger Stone's raided anybody. We got Tyler next on the show later. But we all know, we all saw it. The reason we saw it is because CNN had been tipped that the raid was going to happen. So they had a camera person right there. So when I say we all know about it, we saw it because CNN was tipped off about it, which is brings everything you're talking about, the role of CNN and the role of officials. But here's Anthony Fauci. Let's determine whether he's dispassionate here. He went on Rand Paul's website, and he found things that said not raid Anthony Fauci, not punch him, not have his neighbor attack him as Rand Paul's neighbor attacked him, but that said fire Fauci. So you got to picture this. Anthony Fauci is holding up this fire Fauci thing from Rand Paul's website. And let's hear the dispassionate Anthony Fauci. Play that for us all, won't you, please?
Why would Senator want to do this? So go to Rand Paul website, and you see Fire Dr. Fauci with a little box that says, contribute here. You can do $5, $10, $20, $100. So you are making a catastrophic epidemic for your political gain. So the
you have politically attacked your colleagues and in a politically reprehensible way attacked their reputations.
So there's Rand Paul pointing out you've attacked your colleagues in a reprehensible way, which we played earlier. Now, I'll say this. Fauci, pay attention, Dr. Fauci. He's not making money off the epidemic. That would be you, sir. He's making money off of people who don't like you, sir. right, Rod? He's not making money directly off the epidemic, the pandemic, whatever it is now. It's some kind of demic now. He's doing what politicians do, which is they raise money. And I've said this before, politicians raise money. They're in the raising money business. They always ask for donations. So did he sound that dispassionate to you, Rod?
Yeah, he sounds angry that how dare Rand Paul attack his credibility. And we didn't play the clip here, but Fauci a few weeks ago did say that he represents science. I mean, that's one of the craziest things I've ever heard. And look at the position he's in, and it just goes along with. So I believe he should be fired, but I don't think he's gonna be fired. But so it just goes along with the trend.
Now let's do a backstory fact check on that. Let me just check. No, he does not actually represent science. He does not. And there's nothing scientific about the way he's approaching things. But this is one of the themes I'm developing this week, is that Republicans, Democrats are both awful. And today I'm going after a Republican, but Democrats are worse. And I'll stick by that. Democrats are worse. And one of the ways they're worse, we talked about this with the great Gary Smith from Unsafe Space yesterday, is that Democrats are pretentious. Democrats think, Andrew Breitbart used to call it, I gave it the office politics. In other words, merely by being a Democrat, you're not racist, right? Just by virtue of being a Democrat, you're not racist and you're pro-science. Why? Because you got a D after your voting registration. And it's a kind of presumptuousness and arrogance that in a weird way you don't get on the Republican side, but is galore on the Democrat side. Now, let me go after the Republican. I'm going to go after Mike Rounds. Mike Rounds is the senator, the junior senator from the place I am, South Dakota. By the way, I'm going to say one other thing. People in South Dakota, they're having a cold wave on the East Coast. And they were literally talking about the temperatures are down to 11 or so in Boston. And don't forget, they closed schools. Again, I've been talking about the temperatures here every day. It's been routinely 3, -1 here in South Dakota. You've heard me, Rod, for the past couple of weeks, right? Every day I say it's like 3 degrees out.
Yeah, not accounting for the wind chill.
Not accounting for the wind chill, because you went to school up in Minnesota, and you know that wind chill is where they get you. If it's 5 degrees on the thermometer, and you go outside and there's a 20-mile. Did you get those where you went to school in Minnesota? The 20-mile-an-hour winds, 30-mile-an-hour winds.
Oh yeah, I live right by the lake that goes into Canada, so I felt that. You feel it in your skin. Doesn't even feel cold. It's your bones that hurt.
Yes, that's exactly right. And I'm at an age where my bones just hurt. Anyway, I am a mess. But, so Mike Rounds is the junior senator from South Dakota. The senior senator is John Thune, who recently announced he's running for a record 3rd term up here in South Dakota. And I'm leaving Thune out of this because what happened was, and we're going to go to the first clip first here, Saul. Mike Rounds went on, first off, he went on George Stephanopoulos' show. Now, when you're doing that, you're kowtowing to the establishment, right? I mean, that's what you're doing.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's George Stephanopoulos is the establishment. He represents the establishment.
Right. He's the establishment. And he has no journalistic credentials, but he was in the Clinton administration, and he looks vaguely like Jackson Brown's cousin. So close enough. He's got that John Edwards late 70s Jackson Brown haircut. You know what I'm saying?
I've heard he's been mistaken for Jeff Gordon, the NASCAR driver.
I could see that too. It's a sort of a Jeff Gordon-y thing going on. But Mike Rounds went up there, and we're going to save some of these clips, Saul, for when Tyler comes on. So if I seem like I forget, remind me, because the co-host today is the clips. But I want to play the first one with Mike Rounds talking about Russia. So George Stephanopoulos had just had a guest on talking about these talks that are going on now between Russia and the U.S., which, by the way, Rob, let me ask you a question before we play this clip. Do you think that the Biden administration would hesitate to go to war with Russia over Ukraine? Do you think they're too smart or noble to do that?
No, not at all. But I don't think they're that stupid to step up against another nuclear power like Russia. So
I'll just ask you to consider that you said they're not that stupid. They're possibly that stupid. We've seen so many moves from them that are stupid that at a certain point you go, well, maybe they are that stupid. But I don't think that there's nothing in their character, and we agree on this point, I think. There's nothing in their character, right, that would keep them from going to war. In fact, the thing they said is a non-starter about.
Oh, looks like we lost Lee. Rod,
So
you want to pick it up?
Lee was going to go and talk about the non-starter of the expansion of NATO, and I believe we had Peter Oliver on yesterday discussing that, and I believe that was one of the most egregious things for someone representing America to say it's a non-starter to continue expanding Russia. I definitely agree with Lee's sentiment of what he was about to say, that it's just crazy for the Biden administration to keep antagonizing Russia, to keep pushing up against it and expanding, placing weapons in different countries surrounding Russia. And why is it so outrageous for the U.S. media to say that Putin's crazy for not wanting NATO to expand? It's almost suicidal, and I definitely think that where we are in the time right now for the propaganda to antagonize Russia through Ukraine, through using Ukraine as a proxy, it's dangerous. It's suicidal. I keep hearing more Americans discussing the fact that we might be going to war with Russia. I don't understand how people are just okay with the fact that we're antagonizing Russia to start another war after we just left Afghanistan, and what mess that was. And there's still people stuck in Afghanistan. There's still Americans stuck in Afghanistan as of right now. We're not getting those questions asked of the Biden administration, unfortunately, and what they plan to do to get these Americans out. But there's still Americans stuck in Afghanistan, and it's unfortunately, we're not getting the answers from the Biden administration. We're still waiting for our host, Lee Stranahan, to get back. The number to call in is 202-521-1320 if you have any questions or topics you want to talk. We're waiting for Lee to play this clip of Mike Rounds, the senator from South Dakota, who we're going to hear in this clip. It's another person who's antagonizing Russia and wants to start a possible nuclear war with them. And I don't understand why these Republicans or these rhinos want to continue on this. And it goes along with why they didn't like Donald Trump, because he originally in the 2016 election was open to talking with Putin. But as we saw during his administration, he went along with the establishment Republicans and sent weapons to Ukraine, something that Obama administration didn't do. So we can give him credit for that. But I don't see a 2024 version of Donald Trump reforming himself and finding any ability to de-escalate things with Russia. It would be great. That would be great. Unfortunately, Donald Trump's been excommunicated in a sense. He's not on social media. He does very little interviews. So it's a weird run up to the 2024 election where most people expect him to run. We have Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and other Republicans who are doing their best to keep him from running, and that's getting interesting because they're just joining Democrats, and so let's see what goes on that front. Unfortunately, we don't have a system that should bar people from running from office for unfounded allegations.
Yeah, Lee, you're back. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
Rod.
would
sorry
you
to
play the other
interrupt.
clip?
No, not
Yeah,
yet.
hey,
You're on air. Yeah.
Okay, I'm back, Rod. So let's play the first clip of the part about saying that Trump shouldn't be allowed to run is really frightening. But we'll get to that, and we'll save some of that for Tyler Nixon, maybe even for Ted Rall a little bit, which will be interesting to see Ted's take. Ted is an independent thinker. Let's play Mike Rounds talking about the Russia thing. Hit it, Saul.
And Senator Rounds, let me begin with you. I want to get to the fallout of January 6th, but let me begin with my interview with Secretary of State Antony Blinken and this showdown with Russia over Ukraine. Are you confident that the Biden administration is doing what it needs to do to prevent Russia from going in?
I think we'll support the administration's efforts to find a diplomatic solution. We also have to make it very clear to Mr. Putin that his antics right now in and around Ukraine are unacceptable, which means that if additional sanctions have to be imposed to send that message, that would be appropriate. Nord Stream 2 is one example of a place where we could do that now. The president has the authority to do so. And I think sending a message to Mr. Putin that he's going to get a lot more accomplished using diplomatic means rather than threatening to invade is something that we should be very, very firm about. So, look, as long as the administration is moving forward and they are very clear to Mr. Putin that his antics, excuse me, are not going to be rewarded, then we're going to be very supportive of the administration.
Now, I like the phrase antics he's using there multiple times, Rod. It makes it sound like Putin's wearing a clown nose and juggling, doesn't it? Like, what are the antics? And also, he says Putin's threatening to invade Ukraine. No, actually, it's the opposite. You've heard it multiple times, Rod. Has Russia been threatening to invade Ukraine, or have they said, we're not invading Ukraine? Haven't they said that?
No, they've been very clear, and as you and I and everyone, the audience listening, there is no video or audio of any Russian officials saying we're going to invade Ukraine. It's just propaganda from our side, from the Western media.
And there are no pictures of Vladimir Putin in a clown nose. Not that I've seen. There is video of him playing piano. He doesn't. I don't know if he juggles. I'll bet if he juggles, he's pretty good at it. But you can't find video of him playing piano, and he does like dogs. You've seen the footage of Putin with dogs, right, Rod?
Yeah, he is a dog lover. I've seen that.
Those should be all over TikTok, as far as I'm concerned. If Russia wanted to engage in Western propaganda, they would flood social media with adorable pictures of Putin and a dog, because there's plenty of adorable ones. And that's about the level of most people's political thinking right now. Now, so Rounds is a complete dope on this issue. And when he brings up the Nord Stream 2 thing, this is an obsession with Republicans. Nord Stream 2, hey, Mike, that ship has sailed. Nord Stream 2 is done. And by the way, why is the U.S. sanctioning anybody over a pipeline to supply natural gas to another country? That's between Germany and Russia. But you notice how a lot of Republicans are obsessed with Nord Stream 2, Rod.
Yeah, it's weird to me as a person that's not our gas. It's not, the pipeline's not anywhere near America, so I don't know why we would be trying to stop it, or which we can't, or also put sanctions on it.
Now, Mike Rounds is a guy, by the way, I dealt with Mike Rounds in 2014, the first time I came up to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, or South Dakota, the state of South Dakota in general. And it was in Sioux Falls at a Rounds-Romney event. It was the only time as a journalist I've ever been assaulted. I was shoved backstage for trying to ask Rounds about a question about the rape cases of Native Americans who were raped at Catholic Indian homes, they're called, in South Dakota in like the 50s. Mike Rounds was responsible for throwing out that case, and I've talked about that before. So Mike Rounds, I'm not worried about Mike won't like me. He already doesn't like me. So, and I posted some stuff about that up on my Twitter feed. If you scroll back, you'll be able to find it. But let's get ready because joining us next, author, artist, bon vivant, French dual citizen, so it's appropriate. Ted Rawls with us. That's coming up right after this short break on The Backstory.
Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@sputniknews.com.
So, Sean, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Bob, that's easy. I want to talk about the need to stop the development of self-driving cars.
Again, Sean, you're driving me nuts. I think the self-driving car thing's already out of the gate.
No. It's never too late. See, now the leading experts in the field, I mean, just pick one, whichever one, leading experts have repeatedly warned us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Look, I'm telling you, man, we have to stop the robots by any means necessary.
I see what you did there.
Yep.
Tune into our show By Any Means Necessary daily from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Radio Sputnik. And don't forget to call in at 3:20 p.m. to our studio number 202-521-1320.
And if you miss us live, check us out on SputnikNews.com, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and stay up to date on the latest political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Feeling kind of blue, but maybe also kind of red, and kind of purple, and kind of alone? You've got a friend on Radio Sputnik. Tune into Political Misfits from 12 to 2 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, for news, politics, and culture without the two-party bias. Catch us daily on 105.5 in Washington, D.C., or 102.9 or 104.7 in Kansas City. Or find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your news.
Are you bored? Are you lonely? Do you need a hug? Well, we can't give you that, but we can keep you up to date on Radio Sputnik.
And we are back. I'm investigative journalist Lee Stranahan. This is The Backstory. Joining us now, straight out of Manhattan, I believe he's in Manhattan, is our friend, author, artist, and bon vivant, Ted Rawls. Hey, Ted, how you doing? You're in Manhattan, right?
I am in Manhattan, and I'm recovering from COVID. How are you doing?
Well, I'm fine. So let's talk about you getting COVID for a second, because I was shocked, because you are literally the most vaccinated person I know, right? You've had at least, the last count that I heard was you've been vaccinated 4 times, at least, correct?
Yeah, I'm starting to lose count. Yeah, it's 4 times.
Okay. So let me ask you, if I was shocked, how did you feel? With all the vaccinations you've gotten, a breakthrough, this is like a breakout. What the hell happened, Ted?
Well, I have terrible lungs. I'm not shocked at all. I'm glad I got all. I mean, some people are saying, oh, don't you feel stupid getting vaccinated so much? You got COVID anyway. The way I look at it is if I hadn't gotten double boosted, I'd be in even worse shape than I am now. I have the dreaded flu-rona, which you have heard about. And, it's not a song by the Knack. And
I was going to say, you beat me to that joke, Ted.
I knew you were going to make that joke. I wanted to cut you off at the pass there because I knew you're always good for early 80s new wave joke.
Yes.
So
or late 70s. Let's point out the Knack came out in the late 70s actually, because I saw the Knack live in 1979.
Wow.
So there.
Yeah, that's right. I'd forgotten about that. That's right. I was in high school with the skinny ties, the skinny lapels. They looked great. They had one song, whatever.
They had some good. Actually, they were a good power pop band. They really were. They were a tight band, and they had good. And do you know who the lead singer's brother is? Do you know who he is?
No.
Do you know about this?
No.
So Doug Feiger was the lead singer and guitar. He was the rhythm guitarist, but songwriter of the Knack. And his brother is famous in Michigan politics. He's a Democrat, I believe. Well known in Michigan politics. Doug Feiger's brother, I forget his name, something Feiger, because it's his brother. But it's interesting that that came up. He's run for office, and he was a big booster. And there you go. There you go. So anyway, you were saying you got Flurona. Explain what Flurona is to people.
It's getting the flu and COVID at the same time. And there's some, apparently there's information out of Israel, early indications that say that the two viruses kind of work together. And to add to the insanity, I got the flu shot too. So, you know, not just like last week, like on time. So I should really not be dealing with that anyway. But I have a lot of, you know, I've had pneumonia a bunch of times, and I have scar tissue in my lungs. So I think, you know, anything respiratory is going to always, like, be mean to me. So I'm not at all surprised that, you know, this is happening. But I'm slowly climbing out of the hole.
Well, okay, so we're glad about that. Now, feel free not to pry in your personal medical business, but allow me to pry in your personal medical business and ask you, and again, if you got anything that's too personal or just frankly too gross, too yucky,
sure,
feel free to leave that out. But let me ask you one specific question. Are you, because I've had a couple of friends, Jennifer, who calls in the show frequently, she was diagnosed with COVID. And my friend Alan, who's also been on the show, was diagnosed with COVID. And what both of them had, and it's not gross, but they were really tired all the time. Has that affected you, Ted? Are you tired a lot?
All the time. Yeah, like it's ridiculous. I'm a high energy guy, as Trump would say. And it has really flattened me. So I'm sleeping, you know, I want to sleep like 12 or 14 hours a day. I mean, you know, work and life don't allow it, but I'm really tired. And I don't have like, even just like to go down the stairs of my apartment I'll get winded. It's pretty bad.
Well, you know, I was talking about this to another friend of mine who's been tired a lot, so tired that they can't do much. And I said, have you gone to get tested for COVID-19? And they got kind of upset at me because they said, I work for a living. And what they were saying, Ted, and I think a lot of people are in this position, is let's say you think you've got COVID and you go get tested and you test positive for it. And then they say to you at work, hey, don't come in. And for a lot of people not coming into work, see, as this person pointed out that I'm lucky, and I am. I have a great job. And you and I, in a sense, are lucky because we're kind of independent, not just free spirits, Ted, but you know what I'm saying. Like, and they've always been very good here at work. If I was sick, when I was in the hospital, I was still paid. But do you think that there are millions of Americans who aren't getting tested because they kind of know what the result's going to be, but they also know if they test positive for COVID, all it means is they're going to lose income because there's no treatment that they're doing. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I think that's totally, that has to be happening. I mean, that's the nature of the capitalist system. You know, they're not serious about wanting people to stay home. If they were, they would say, even if you're self-employed or even if you're an independent contractor, you're a waiter, you're a gig worker, you drive Uber, they should pay you your full salary to stay home so you don't infect your fellow citizens. The fact that they don't do that shows that they really don't care that much about this. I mean, well, let's put it this way. They care, they just don't care as much as they care about not paying you.
Well, you know, we were playing clips before, so let's talk about the Democratic Party. Because one thing is you're on the left, but you're no fan of the Democratic Party, right? I mean, you're not slavish in your devotion to them, shall we say. Let me ask you about this, because I don't know what you're going to say. Anthony Fauci was up on Capitol Hill again, and he got into it with Rand Paul again. But my concern about Fauci, and I'm not a Fauci conspiracy theorist, in that when I hear people say, I hear a lot of people say he's responsible for things. No, he's not. Okay, I don't believe that for a second. But I do believe he's become a non-useful spokesperson, by which I mean, it seems to me like a person in his position, you know, a top medical expert, should be somebody that people want to listen to regardless of politics. And he plays this so politically that I think that the people who hate Fauci, he's doing nothing to endear himself to them. And I think he could, by being a little less arrogant and a little more factual. And I don't think he's good at admitting when he's wrong. Let me put it that way. Not trying to psychoanalyze him, but I just don't think he's very good at it. What's your view, Ted, of Anthony Fauci?
Yeah, I agree with your analysis completely. And I think that, you know, if we're going to go to the root cause, the problem is that he's not in a position to really make decisions, as you alluded to. So he's being trotted out in front of the cameras, sometimes without, you know, and he's sometimes undermined hours or a day later by new information from the head of the CDC or whoever that reverses what he thinks. He hasn't been fully briefed. So he's kind of like, you know, he's like Jen Psaki or any kind of PR flack who's just being trotted out and not even like, you know, the boss hasn't even really told him the real deal. So he's not even reliable as a spokesperson. I mean, I think he's kind of in an impossible position. If I were him, I would be frustrated and I would probably step aside because, you know, he probably sort of feels the air going out of the balloon. You know, there was a period when he was kind of a god and he was, you know, people on SNL were thanking him for his service as though he were serving in the military. But those days are over, and I don't even hear my friends who are sort of straight, you know, normal centrist corporate Democrats really talking about how great Fauci is anymore. If I were him, I'd be like, you know, this is more nonsense than I have time for.
Well, no, let me ask you about something Rand Paul said that and I'm sure you're not a big fan of Rand Paul, but I think he makes a very good point on this point. And you and I both lived in Los Angeles at one point. And in Los Angeles, in Southern California, they're now saying that if you were diagnosed with COVID-19, if you're asymptomatic and you're a healthcare worker, you can still go to work. You saw that, right, Ted?
I did.
Now, what Rand Paul pointed out is somebody who you know for sure has COVID or was diagnosed with COVID, but because they're asymptomatic, they can go to work. But if you're somebody who hasn't been tested or hasn't been vaccinated or whatever, you're not allowed to go to work. You'll be fired. And Rand Paul pointed out that that seems to be a bizarre policy. What do you think of the policy, A, in Southern California, and the apparent, you know, the idea that people with COVID can go to work, but people who aren't vaccinated, regardless of their status, are going to be fired? What do you think of that policy, Ted?
I think Senator Paul is totally right, and I would go further than that. You know, I don't want people who might be positive for COVID going to work in a healthcare facility, because, you know, unless for those same people are only dealing with COVID cases, I mean, they're dealing with patients who have other problems, and they might be spreading COVID in a healthcare facility. I mean, that's insane.
Well, do you know what you sound like, Ted, when you say that? You sound like someone from the nurses union, because that's exactly what the nurses union's saying. The healthcare workers unions, I've heard them on the news. They're saying this is insane, and they're saying this is dangerous for patients.
Well,
they're saying, right?
Well, of course they're right. I mean, that's just common sense. I mean, look, what they're saying is basically we changed the rules because we're so short of healthcare workers that we're making a judgment that we need to have even possibly COVID positive healthcare workers at work because we're so short that otherwise people are not going to get care. And I understand that judgment, but I think it's the wrong call.
And by COVID positive, you don't just mean people like if they went to you who has COVID, said, hey, you're going to make it. You're going to pull through, Ted. Don't you worry. That's one way to be COVID positive, but that's not what you're talking about. You're talking about actually diagnosed. Like in Southern California, Ted, you're symptomatic, but, you know, that's also somewhat a judgment call, right? Because...
Well, it is a judgment call. And taking myself as a study of the Rawls study, I tested positive a week ago Thursday, and I only got my first negative test yesterday. So I was positive for, showing viral load for 10 full days.
Now, I got to say, though, if when Joe Biden came into office, he was more or less hanging his hat that he would handle the COVID-19 crisis better than Donald Trump did. But you heard Biden, I'm sure, recently come out and said, this is not a federal problem. Now, wasn't that exactly what Trump was attacked for? Not approaching it as a federal problem, but a state problem? Am I missing something?
No, I think you're right. That is right. I remember just thinking that was just awful. I mean, talk about whatever happened to Harry Truman. The buck stops here. The buck never even arrived there with Biden. I also wonder, and if I were a Republican, I would be sort of spreading this message in preparation for the midterms and certainly for Trump's bid in 2024. Like, would a Democratic president, would President Hillary Clinton have fast-tracked, Project Warp Speed? Would she have suspended the normal length of clinical trials that were normally previously were required, that Trump got rid of, that allowed these vaccines to be developed so quickly? I mean, we're not going to ever know for sure, but I kind of doubt it. I think Republican politics kind of allowed them to go into an anti-regulatory mode and fast track this thing in a way that a Democratic president probably wouldn't have.
Oh, that's very interesting. It's a very good point, actually. Is that if I may restate it, see if I am understanding the point that I think is good. You're saying that because Republicans tend to be anti-regulatory in general, correct?
Yes.
This is the basis of it. That yes. Republicans are against regulations broadly anyway, and Democrats are more in favor of a regulatory administration, bureaucracy, or whatever. That allowed the vaccine to bypass the bureaucracy easier because the Republicans were pushing. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, President Trump at the time did order the suspension of a lot of normal FDA requirements for vaccine testing and allowed Pfizer and Moderna and the other companies to make this go faster. So, that required, it was a political action. It wasn't just sort of a policy orientation. It was it was an executive order. I don't know if Clinton would have done that.
No, it's a very good point. Now, I'm going to get your take on something just because I'm going to talk about it more with Tyler Nixon coming up, but I would like your take being on the left. So in January 6th, one of the arguments being made now is that it was a threat to democracy. And Joe Biden made a speech on January 6th. He emphasized over and over again the threat to democracy. First off, did you view whatever happened on January 6th? And all I'm saying by whatever happened is, obviously people got into the Capitol. I'm not sure that was an insurrection. If it was, they suck at it. But whatever you want to call that, a protest, an uprising, whatever. Did you think that was a threat to democracy from your perch on the left, Ted Rall?
Not much of one. I think the threat could be down the road, where someone who's looking at what happens there might say, you know, with planning and with the cooperation of local and possibly federal law enforcement, which was, you know, there are many, many right-wingers in there, you know, this might have worked. They might have, you know, suspended the voting. They might have declared it. You could see a future scenario where suspending the results of an election or, you know, declaring a national emergency, blah, blah, blah. You can see how that might work. But this particular act itself, I think, was a shot across the bow at, I mean, you know, let's face it, fundamentally a ceremony. We knew the outcome of the election. The ceremony could have been held later. In fact, the ceremony was delayed by hours, but it was delayed, and they did it later. I think it was a shot across the bow. I don't think it was an insurrection. An insurrection requires more. You know, it's not an attempt to this was not an attempt to overthrow the government of the United States. I think this was like, you know, in elementary school, how kids wad up toilet paper and throw it at the ceiling of the boys' room. Or I don't know what happens in the girls' room, but that's at least in the boys' room they would do that to see what would stick. And I think that's what happened there. And you know, it didn't stick.
Yeah, and I didn't think it would stick. There was no possible way. What do they think would happen if they were? This is why I say if that was an insurrection, they suck at it. Because if this was an insurrection, you know, there was no follow through possible. In other words, they were going to, at worst, they could delay the election being certified for a few hours, right? But the election was going to be certified even if they had to do Zoom conferences from people's houses. Does that make sense? Like,
totally.
It was not like
the election. Yeah, the outcome was known. It had been known for weeks, right? For sure. It was known, you know, I think December 10th, if memory serves, is when all the governors signed their certifications of the Electoral College votes. So there was really not that much at stake. You know, if you watch the HBO documentary 4 Hours at the Capitol, it is disturbing, but it's also there's a lot of details that, you know, Democrats don't like to talk about. Like, there were about 50,000 people there, according to the Park Service, but probably no more than like 1,300 people who ever went into the Capitol. So it's objectively true that 98% of the attendees never went inside. So people who like lost their jobs just for having been milling around on the mall in the cold, you know, that's a little silly. I mean, look, it was a really over-the-top, disgusting act. And when Democrats tried to gild the lily, you know, when they hyperventilate about and they exaggerate this thing, they just look silly because what really happened was bad enough. They really shouldn't exaggerate it.
And I would argue that what happened was worse for Republicans generally because of the way it's been spun. And as you say, a lot of people who were there didn't go in, and a lot of people who were watching, who were Republicans or Trump supporters, were not in favor of this. But there we go. Now we've got Joe Biden down in Georgia now, and they're saying that he's going to make his central issue, what he's saying is voting rights. Do you think Joe Biden's all about voting rights, or is he about doing things that will help assure victory for Democrats? Do you think it's more partisan or ideological?
Well, of course it's partisan. No, of course it's partisan. Look, the struggle over what is quote unquote called, by the way, this is a rare example of clever framing by the Democratic Party. They don't do that very often. But equating this struggle over basically how the voting rules are changed in order to make sure that, like, you know, one party versus another gets to is more likely to have their voter turnout higher. That is a you know, that framing that's been an ongoing battle. And the Republicans certainly have been very successful with redistricting and gerrymandering and so on. But trying to equate it to a civil rights struggle, as Democrats have been doing by calling it a voting rights type thing, has been smart. But I think most people can probably see through it. I don't think it's going to move the lever and the needle, at all. I just don't think voters who on either side care about this. So it's a strange choice of issues to go into the midterms with.
But I think part of why they're doing it, and the reason for the framing you talked about, which I agree is bothersome, by calling it voting rights, I think the Democrats are very worried they're not going to get enough black votes to win. And so they're trying to cynically appeal to black votes. Does that sound right, Ted?
Yeah, that sounds right. And I don't really think that's going to work. I mean, watch MSNBC and you'll see them talking about this 26 hours a day. But I just don't see how that's going to bring anyone to the polls who wouldn't otherwise go to the polls. I think, black people have other issues that they're probably in general more agitated about. And they're more likely to vote Democratic, obviously, overwhelmingly anyway. I guess it's a question of energizing the base, and it might work a little bit. It couldn't hurt Democrats at all, but I just don't. I wouldn't, if I were them, I wouldn't make this my lead issue. I might make it a secondary or tertiary issue.
Well, and I got to say, the way I think it may hurt them is if it's perceived by black voters as a ineffectual, cynical move. A lot of black voters who are kind of already feeling hoodwinked, if I can use that phrase, right, led astray, bamboozled. I think that it may exacerbate that. Used is another way to put it. I was quoting Malcolm, but I'm just saying, if that's what's going on, I think it could make things even worse for the Democrats. But we'll see. Ted Rall, first off, get well. Glad you could come on, but I want to make sure you get well. That's the primary thing. And great appearance as usual. Thanks so much to Ted Rall. And the website, don't forget he's sick. Don't let that sway your web-going habits. But
Listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
And we are back. It is time for the second hour, the final hour today of the best damn radio show in the world, the show that brings you the truth behind the headlines. It's The Backstory. And so we begin the first of our co-host experiments. Great friend of the show, great friend of mine, Jason Goodman is joining us. Hey, Jason, how you doing?
I'm well, Lee. How are you?
I'm good. Jason will be the guest co-host for this hour on The Backstory. And by the way, we got joining us in a half hour, Jason, the great Tyler Nixon, coming up on The Backstory.
Excellent.
Now, I don't know if, Rod, I don't know if how much I got out because my audio cut out before. and Rod ably filled in, which if my audio goes out again, Jason, you will be ably filling in. So get ready. Well, it's not the internet. They told me I cannot put a dish up on my roof. I talked to them, just so Saul knows. They said I could put it out on my porch. I'm not sure that'll be effective.
Well,
Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. You got Starlink coming from Elon Musk. I've seen a couple tweets. People are receiving their dishes, and then cats sit on them. They're attracting cats for some reason.
That's what I'd like to get is I got no. One of the things I've decided is no pets in my life at this point.
Right.
But the Starlink is what I was hoping to put on the roof, but I can only put it in a bucket of concrete on my porch, they told me, the management in my apartment. Yeah. So I don't know if that's going to be effective.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I might call Starlink and see. 202-521-1320. I want to get to Malik and then Tarif. We had to take some calls. So first is Malik. Malik's a great caller on the show, Jason, a regular part of the Backstory family here. And Malik in D.C., what is on your mind? You're on with Jason and I.
Hey there, fellas. How you doing there? Thanks.
Hi.
Call.
Good. What's on your mind, Malik?
Well, I wanted to call yesterday, but I figured, Brave had called in and was kind of handling the situation, and also, you guys were about to get off the air when you kind of were diving into the whole black on black crime issue. And I really wanted to talk to you about it, but obviously, there was no time. And I think it actually connects to discussion that you and I were having, obviously months ago in terms of the Panthers. So if you wanted to reiterate what you were saying, Lee, so, kind of bring people up to speed who might not have been listening.
Well, part of it, let me, because I had more of a discussion about it with my friend Jen a little bit later after the show. And it helped me clarify one point, because what Brave and I got into a little bit yesterday is the argument about what causes the crime.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, that's not the first step. Logically, the first step is it true or not? For instance, are in fact the number one victims of black violence nationwide black folks? And if you were to reduce that violence, wouldn't black folks benefit by not being killed? That's the first thing. Now, what Brave got into, and I got into it with him, so I'm not blaming anybody, but I'm saying is sort of a more secondary issue, which is, well, what causes it? In a sense, I'm saying, like, why does that matter, actually? The first thing is, because here's what I mean by that. If the numbers aren't there, the numbers aren't there. And I don't hear the left, the Democrats, even acknowledge that the numbers are higher. Somehow even acknowledging that fact is considered verboten, off limits. And where you saw this is under the Obama administration. They literally stopped keeping track of the amount of crime committed by ethnic groups. They stopped tracking it. Yes, and because you used to be able to track it, then the Trump administration seems to have brought it back. But for a while there, you couldn't even talk about it. So let me start there with you, Malik.
Right.
Do you think, in fact,
I touch on that.
there is such a phenomenon? Forget what causes it for a second. I'm not saying we can never discuss it, but I'm saying first, do you agree that there is a numbers issue there?
As I've said before when I called in before, I grew up in Central Harlem, and also grew up partly in some of the poorest areas of Brooklyn, New York City, in a time actually that might have even been more violent than now. It's an issue. Sure, there's an issue. There's an issue throughout the African world with an issue of fratricidal violence that could be connected to poverty, and I don't. I don't make the separation for me and someone has been a political organizer. I don't make a distinction between the violence that I'll see in Washington and southeast of Washington, D.C., and the violence that I'll see, that you'll see in many areas of the continent, or Brazil. I don't make those distinctions because I think they're actually connected. And I want to make a point of saying that the reason that people will make the point that it is connected to poverty is because, speaking specifically of Black people in America, the damage that you see in the community now and with our families, and you can't separate the crime issue from the breakup of families and communities. You can't make a distinction. And separate those things. The Black community, the family, remained intact up until beyond the Reconstruction era. The Black family remained intact largely up until the late '60s. And so we have to actually look at what were the changes that took place during those times.
Well, actually, that would bring us into the abortion issue again, to me, in some ways. But let me explain why the numbers are important. There's a difference between, to me, a slight difference, and a slight difference would be, so let's use abortion as an example. If the number of Black folks who were getting abortions on a per capita basis was 10% higher than white folks, who cares? And what I mean by that is, that's not a big enough change to me to note too much. 10%. Does that make sense? It's just not that big a difference. If there were a 10% wage gap, most people would go, well, that is what it is. But if it's like on abortion, for instance, at one point, it was 6 times higher. 6 times. As soon as you get into multiples. So if the Black murder rate, for instance, was 10% higher, 20% higher than the white murder rate, then that to me is worth noting, but it's not a crisis. But when the Black murder rate, for instance, is multiple times higher, then that becomes a crisis. Does that make sense on the numbers, Malik?
I'm not here. I'm not here to deny that there's not a crisis, and I would agree with you that folks on the left do largely ignore the issue. My point is that it is an issue that is connected to the issue, and I don't, and this may offend folks, to the issue of colonialism. Like as I was saying, the Black family remained intact largely up until the late '60s. We did have a concerted effort on the part of the federal government to destroy our political movements, and some would even make the argument that the U.S. government actively assassinated and destroyed political organizations and ran political leaders into exile. And so my point is, let's deal with all of those things, the ugliness of it, and the numbers. But let's deal with how we arrived at that. This is a poverty issue.
Well, and also I got to say, like I say, and I'll bring it back to the abortion issue only in that I've pointed out numerous times, Margaret Sanger was literally a white supremacist. Literally. She spoke to the Klan in Jersey in the 30s, I think. So to me, it should tie in some of those issues. But I've noticed a reticence on the part of people on the left to even discuss those issues. Does that make sense, Malik? And by the way, Jason, if you have any questions or comments for Malik, now's a good time, because I get them only for time reasons, want to move on in a second.
Sure. Well, Malik raises the 1960s, and right away I'm thinking about Lyndon Johnson and all the things that he did that, on the letter of the page, the Civil Rights Act, et cetera, But I think that Lyndon Johnson was a liar and a trickster and really only interested in his own well-being. And I'm sure Malik is familiar with the famous quote that Lyndon Johnson said, "We will have," he's referring to black voters, "voting for us for the next 200 years. So, I mean, this is an issue that I don't personally have enough of a background in to really provide useful input to, but you start talking about the destruction of the black family in the 1960s, I'm thinking about Lyndon Johnson and the destruction of America that really got into full swing in the 1960s.
That's a very interesting point, Jason. Malik, let me throw it to you for comment, then we got to move on only because we got Tarif and then Karen on the line.
The crime issue or the violence issue is clear, that's the end of that discussion. I'm saying that's a part of it.
Well, I've said before, Malik, and I'll just use the phrase white man's burden. This is the view that was propagated by the British, around the time of Cecil Rhodes and Rudyard Kipling and Milner's Kindergarten and that whole group. The way they view race is the white man's burden. In other words, they viewed themselves, Rhodes was a noted white supremacist, but what they viewed as it's a variant of noblesse oblige, the idea that the aristocracy of the nobles should take care of the dregs, out of some obligation. And it's the same thing, the white man's burden form of racism. That's what I think we see among liberal Democrats, because that form of liberalism literally stems back to Rhodes and that group. But Malik, great call as usual. Let's quickly go to our friend Tarif, 202-521-1320. Tarif, what is on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call, gentlemen. I have three comments. First, I'd like to say for Julian Assange, my first comment is this. I was listening to Alex McCurris and Christopher from the Duran. They was talking about how the Russians doing a meeting exposed the U.S. confusion of, how the U.S. is very fractured on conversation dealing with NATO, dealing with expansion of NATO in Europe, and how the deep state don't trust Biden to talk with Xi or Putin because Xi and Putin are like master negotiators. So, the Biden administration is exposed on that front. My second comment is dealing with the paperwork.
Well, let me just say, I don't think I agree with Alex that the deep state doesn't trust Biden. The deep state is Biden, but go ahead, Tarif. Second point.
Okay. The second point is that I think, in my opinion, is the paperwork that came out with the project franchise got the hands on from Dorpaw. It seemed like it's making its rounds, and we got this thing exposed food shit. I think it should invite James O'Keefe on where he can explain what's going on because, this is the D.C. radio waves. And if he give his side of the story for 10 or 15 minutes, that would be good. My last comment is to invite some other people back on your show, like Harley Schleiler, when you used to have him come on your show like 2 years ago. And you had Anton Shakin that came on last year. And this other guy I know that's Matthew Atwood. They specialize, Anton Shakin, you had him on before. The author that wrote the book on treasonous in America, in the American Revolution, and Harley Schleiler that talk about Bill Browder, because Harley Schleiler know a lot about Bill Browder and George Soros and other people, and Matthew Atwood.
Yes. Most people have no idea who Bill Browder even is, let alone want to hear more commentary about what he's doing. I've just learned that...
You heard about Hunter Biden and this guy in Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
Who was arrested for treason.
Yeah.
And that this is the guy that Hunter Biden has said he's close to. He's close friends, I believe, he said.
Yep.
So I was looking into him, the guy who was arrested for treason in Kazakhstan. And this guy's a globalist par excellence. And I'll just throw out a theory. Some of the stuff we're seeing in Kazakhstan seems like it may have come through Ukraine.
Yep.
Right? In other words, that Ukraine is, in a sense, a staging ground. I'm not saying a literal staging ground, but I'm saying that some training and support in terms of finance and stuff like that seems to have come through Ukraine. So how big a deal do you think, and I've talked about Mike Rounds, and I'll just ask you, we'll be talking to Tyler about it as well. But this guy, Mike Rounds, he's the junior senator from up here in South Dakota. He's a Republican. And he was on, let's get the second clip there, Saul. Let's play that clip now, then we'll go to Karen. This is Mike Rounds on George Stephanopoulos over the weekend. And he's gotten into a tiff with Donald Trump. Trump was not happy about this appearance. And I think you'll hear why from this clip. Let's play the first clip, the one after the Russia one, of Mike Rounds talking about January 6th, Jason. I don't know if you heard this.
You voted to certify the election last year. You condemned the protests as an insurrection. What do you say to all those Republicans, all those veterans who believe the election was stolen, who've bought the falsehoods coming from former President Trump?
We looked, as a part of our due diligence, we looked at over 60 different accusations made in multiple states. While there were some irregularities, there were none of the irregularities which would have risen to the point where they would have changed the vote outcome in a single state. The election was fair as we've seen. We simply did not win the election as Republicans for the presidency. And moving forward, and that's the way we want to look at this, moving forward, we have to refocus once again on what it's going to take to win the presidency. And if we simply look back and tell our people don't vote because, there's cheating going on, then we're going to put ourselves in a huge disadvantage. So moving forward, let's focus on what it takes to win those elections. We can do that, but we have to let people know that they can believe and they can have confidence that those elections are fair, and that is in every single state that we looked at.
So we may play that again when Tyler comes on. But before we go to Karen, let me ask you, Jason, do you think any Republican, particularly an elected Republican, who's a senator, should be saying, and I'm going to say, let's even leave aside the irregularities he admits they found. So I didn't say we didn't find any irregularities. He's basically saying we found irregularities, but so what, right?
Right.
Even those aside for a second, do you think any Republican, knowing what happened with the Hunter Biden laptop story, bring that back, should say that the 2020 election was fair, which is what he said?
I don't think that any reasonable observer should say that. And I also want people to focus on the fact that whenever this information is presented to us, or at least that I observe, and somebody like George Stephanopoulos is explaining it, he doesn't give an I wasn't impartial there. Anytime somebody like George Stephanopoulos is trying to explain it, he's not giving you an impartial recounting of the facts. They always put in this little editorialization like the lies coming from Donald Trump. And Mike Pence stood his ground. It wasn't about standing his ground. All people who were there on January 6th not attacking the Capitol, including myself, wanted to see happen, was for Mike Pence to go in there and say, hey, these state legislatures here are challenging the results. So I cannot give you uncontested election results. Here it is. That's all he had to do, was accurately convey that there were challenges to the results and then begin a fair assessment of those challenges. Not to say this was fair, so therefore we're not going to investigate. That's crazy.
Now, and I just want to also, because you were there, before we go to Karen, you were there on January 6th. We had Ted Roll on last hour, and Ted said the park police said there were about 50,000 people there, and we know about 1,300 went inside. From what you saw, do those numbers sound right, that there were about 50,000 people total there, but we know 1,300 went in? Does that sound right to you, Jason, having been there?
Absolutely incorrect. I mean, I cannot speak to how many people went inside because I wasn't there, but I'll tell you this, Lee. In my previous career as a cinematographer, I took part in a concert film where I stood on stage at a football stadium. I forget which one, but the capacity was 120,000 and it was sold out. And on stage, looking at 120,000 people is quite a sight to behold. I had never seen that many people in one place at one time. And when I turned around, standing outside the Capitol, and looked at the people coming towards the Capitol, there was something like 10 times that number of people that I observed in the stadium. So I think there was easily hundreds of thousands of people there, and maybe more.
So you're saying that, and Ted was making the point that even if the numbers were 50,000 and 1,300, that's 99% of the people didn't go in.
Right.
So to blame, right? But you're saying that the 50,000 number sounds low to you. That's what you're saying,
Just
Jason. Go
dramatically low. Totally incorrect. I would think that, 500,000 would be low. I think it was over 1 million people who were there that day.
So that's even more. And again, Ted was being saying, even with 50,000, this is not like a large-scale insurrection.
Right.
This is a small percentage of the people there. And you're saying the number of people who went in, because we do know those numbers a little better.
Yeah.
We can see it's about
on video and everything. But, Lee, another point you raised, they keep calling it an insurrection, but no one's been charged with insurrection. This is literally like somebody gets arrested for shoplifting, and every time the prosecutor refers to the suspect, they refer to them as a murder suspect and a murder trial. It's not what it is.
And Stephanopoulos said to Rounds, you've agreed it's an insurrection. And Rounds didn't say, whoa, 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 stop right there.
Ridiculous.
Let's quickly go to Karen in Maryland. Karen's in Maryland, right, Saul? That's what I thought. Okay, there we go. 202-521-1320. Hey, Karen, what is on your mind?
Hi there. Good afternoon. Let me ask you, change the subject. If people don't agree that this happens and it's just going to be a short conversation, you'll have to persuade me that it doesn't. Have you ever heard of weather as a weapon or weather modification or being able to, I guess those are the two terms that it's referred to as. In other words, there's natural weather and man-made weather. So have you heard of those terms?
So I've never seen anything that I would consider solid evidence of anyone using weather as a weapon. Wait, Saul, did you say Braves on? Okay.
I think the harp is what.
Okay.
Yeah,
but
the harp
Jason
is what she's referring to.
So, yeah, Jason, talk about what you know then.
I have heard of this. And I mean, again, I don't personally have knowledge of it. But of course, any technology that we speak about, I mean, in 1980, if I told you, hey, someday you're going to have a supercomputer in your pocket with a 4K screen on it, you'd say, okay, whatever, that sounds fanciful. But, I mean, there are a lot of examples of technology to manipulate weather. I think in UAE, they're seeding clouds to get regular rain. The HARP is the High Altitude Atmospheric Research Program that uses large arrays of radio telescopes that can produce a wide range of electromagnetic frequencies. And the stated purpose is to conduct a variety of experiments, most of which are classified, that, among other things, excite the ionosphere in an effort to provoke some kind of response. And, of course, I don't understand a lot about how the universe works and meteorology works, but if you start shooting massive amounts of energy at the ionosphere, can that affect weather? It seems possible. So I can't really answer the caller directly, but I have heard about it, and I think there are ways certain types of things could be done.
Well, no, that was a great answer. And it's one of the reasons, Jason, I wanted you on once a week on Truth Tuesdays. That's what we'll call it. I was trying to think of a good alliteration.
Yeah,
because we got,
that's great, and I appreciate it.
Carmine Mondays. So we got the M's there.
Mm-hmm.
Carmine Mondays. So Jason Goodman, there's no obvious days of the week that start with J or G. Crowdsource the Truth is the way to find Jason. And so Truth Tuesdays, I think that's good, right?
Yeah, it sounds good.
Right, so we'll go with that. Anyway, we got more coming up with Jason co-hosting the show. It's our first time with someone as a guest host. or guest co-host. What are you exactly? I'm not sure. But
I am a co-guest host, co-hosting.
There we go. That's good. Joining us next, our guest. That's easier. Tyler Nixon joining us right after this on The Backstory.
Stuck in traffic? No problem. Stay informed. Stay tuned to Radio Sputnik on 105.5 FM or 1390 AM in the Washington, D.C. area. Need more? Follow us on Facebook or check us out on SputnikNews.com.
When the going gets tough, the powerful want propaganda. But we won't let them cancel the facts. Whether you're woke or drowsy, we know that you can handle the truth, and we're giving it to you every morning. Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan every Monday through Friday from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Your first stop for sanity in a world gone mad.
In a media landscape filled with so-called journalists acting as stenographers for their billionaire bosses, there is a desperate need for news, analysis, and perspectives that buck the status quo and get to the heart of how domestic and international events impact you and me, as well as showing how we can get involved in the struggle to change that status quo. Check out By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik, Monday through Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, to hear the stories and voices that mainstream media refuses to tell you. And join us as we connect the political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us. That's By Any Means Necessary, Monday through Friday at 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on Radio Sputnik.
Hi, I'm political analyst Garland Nixon.
And I'm political scientist, author, and nationally syndicated columnist Dr. Wilmer Leon.
We're the co-hosts for The Critical Hour, airing Monday through Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C.
We close out your day with a thorough and hard-hitting analysis of the day's top stories, where we bring in brilliant scholars, authors, and investigative journalists from around the world.
And on Fridays, it's panel time, when we do a roundup of the week's most important issues.
Join us to keep up with the world's top stories.
Enjoy an in-depth analysis.
And have a little fun along the way. Listen to our show,
The Critical Hour, Monday through Fridays on Radio Sputnik.
We are back and flying through an episode on Tuesday of The Backstory, the best damn radio show in the world. Now a guy who's not afraid to bring it. Commentator, writer, and deadhead, Tyler Nixon. Hey, Tyler, how you doing? Hey, now.
I'm doing great. How about yourselves?
Doing very well. We had Jason Goodman on co-hosting with us. Tyler, Jason,
Hi, Tyler.
Jason,
really?
Tyler.
Good man, Jason. Good to be with you.
Likewise. Nice to meet you.
Now, you know, Jason, did you know Tyler used to live down the street from the Bidens, went to school with Hunter?
No, I must admit, Tyler, I know very little about you. I apologize.
Okay, so let's play that first clip that we just played again. I want to play that first clip again because I want to comment on a couple of things about that. Let's play that, Saul, again, please. Mike Round, Senator from South Dakota, with George Stephanopoulos. Go ahead.
You voted to certify the election last year. You condemned the protests as an insurrection. What do you say to all those Republicans, all those veterans who believe the election was stolen, who've bought the falsehoods coming from former President Trump?
We looked, as a part of our due diligence, we looked at over 60 different accusations made in multiple states. While there were some irregularities, there were none of the irregularities which would have risen to the point where they would have changed the vote outcome in a single state. The election was fair as we've seen. We simply did not win the election as Republicans for the presidency. And moving forward, and that's the way we want to look at this, moving forward, we have to refocus once again on what it's going to take to win the presidency. And if we simply look back and tell our people don't vote because, you know, there's cheating going on, then we're going to put ourselves in a huge disadvantage. So moving forward, let's focus on what it takes to win those elections. We can do that, but we have to let people know that they can believe and they can have confidence that those elections are fair, and that is in every single state that we looked at.
Now, I'm going to be honest, Tyler. I played that to piss you off because the fact is you are capable of bringing a great deal of bombast. And so I'll ask you a question, then I'm setting you up like a bull, right? So I'm going to ask you the question, then do what you do so well. Feel free to go off on this. Do you think Tyler Nixon, any elected Republican, should be out there saying, particularly senator, that the 2020 election was fair? What say you, Tyler Nixon?
Real quick, Jason, is this Jason Goodman who interviewed Jason Sullivan? Oh, man.
John
thank
Sullivan.
you.
Yes, that's me.
John Sullivan, excuse me. Yeah.
Yes.
That was brilliant, my friend. Let me tell you something. I'm glad I have the opportunity to thank you for that. That was genius. So having said that,
thank you very much.
You know, I guess I would say to these squishy senators like Mr. Rounds, stop helping. I mean, you know, this is a lifelong politician. I just went through his Wikipedia page. I mean, his entire existence has been a political career. And this is the problem that we have. And worse, he's from a state where he was reelected by a 75% plus margin of victory. Well, not a margin, excuse me, but he got 75% of the vote there in 2020. So, you know, he's so safe as a lifelong politician that, let's face it, he feels that he would rather not have bad media coverage from the mainstream, whatever you want to call it, the propaganda media, the corporate media, and would probably rather score points with a Stephanopoulos and, you know, the Georgetown set and what have you, what they used to call the salon crowd, than to dare step out and question the conventional wisdom. I use that term loosely. And frankly, it's again, this is the problem you have when you have safe incumbents, to the point, you know, when we have safe Democrat seats held by the likes of, say, a Pelosi, whoever, they use that as the ability to go radically to the left and to go far beyond what anyone would consider sort of the old mainstream Democrat party dogma or ideology. Whereas it seems like we get safe seat Republicans in many cases like this, who are career politicians. They instead betray the party and betray the base and the core of people who sustain the party and have frankly been responsible for the victories and responsible for keeping somewhat of a balance within the federal, the federal elections. And look, I mean, this guy, I don't know why. Why would you step out? First of all, again, going on with Stephanopoulos right there is just sort of a pan to the corporate propaganda media, giving any credibility to someone like Stephanopoulos. I mean, this is, you know, obviously a former Clinton hack. You know, one step out of career-wise, one step out of the Clinton campaign. So it's, you know, give me a break with this guy. The fact that anybody considers him to be a credible, neutral, objective source of anything is you know, the type of demented, perverse, I guess, viewpoint that you would get in the Washington Beltway establishment. That being said, I think it's also to provoke Trump to come out and to make, you know, to blast him. I don't know who he's trying to cater to or to, you know, kiss up to by doing this. And maybe he's trying to think somehow distinguishing himself. I don't know if he thinks he's got some sort of larger agenda. I mean, I don't know how much higher he expects to go than the United States Senate. But the fact is, for him to say we looked at 60 sources or something like that and there was nothing credible that would have changed the election is just completely, I mean, that's akin, in my opinion, to Sotomayor saying that there's 100,000 kids on ventilators. I mean, it's just objectively false. Look at what has come out in Georgia with, as I understand it, they have video evidence of, they have the recordings, the video recordings of these ballot drop boxes where they've got people rolling up with, like, you know, truckloads of them practically in the middle of the night and stuffing these boxes when ballot harvesting is illegal in Georgia. So no one should ever be walking up there with anything but one ballot in their hand. And that's that. And I don't know what more you need. You have Raffensperger, who's now going to have to look into this because it's so egregious, even though he was clearly a, you know, spit in Trump's face immediately and has been absolutely since the election, in my opinion, covering for the corruption that went on there and doing the dirty work of, you know, the Democrat deceivers. And look, I mean, it's just, I think Trump said it best when he said, you know, you can say this for the Democrats. He's like, they're vicious, they're deceitful, or whatever, something like that. He said, but they hang together, they stick with each other. That's one thing they do is never step out of the party line. You don't hear any. I name one Democrat. I can't think of a single national Democrat who's come out and said, yeah, there were real problems with the election. Anything close to it, much less to say that there was actual fraud involved. Whereas, of course, you've got on our side of the equation, the Republican Party, Liz Cheney, Kinzinger, and now this guy, who are just happy enough to participate in these ridiculous exercises in fabricating calumny against Republicans, against Trump, against the entire movement, to the point of, literally persecuting almost by proxy the entire MAGA movement, or anybody who even came close to protesting the obvious anomalies in the election. And it's, I guess it's again like if the truth were that there was absolutely no fraud whatsoever, there were no anomalies, there's nothing like that, then they wouldn't be raising such a stink and making it impossible for anyone to actually voice objections, or moreover, they wouldn't need to censor these people and literally obliterate them off social media and so forth. How many people were just literally deleted entirely from Twitter and other platforms simply for even raising the fact of there being anomalies and enough certainly to swing elections. But yeah, it's again, my motto with these guys: stop helping. You're 75% who, is he serving South Dakotans by doing this? Who is he trying to suck up to? And it's just a sad statement when you have a career politician like this. And that's exactly what they want, that media love. I guess he got his little moment in the sun. But what was accomplished, other than to undermine the Republican Party generally, and to just give fodder to the people who are manufacturing and fabricating a complete disgusting witch hunt and political persecution writ large against half the country, at least.
Well,
Tyler,
I'll tell you
if I
one
may,
thing. Wait, one second, Jason. Let me just make one point, then I'll turn it over to you, Jason.
Sure.
One thing, Mike Rounds, because I'm up here in South Dakota, one thing he did do, and anyone can look this up and see it, when he was governor, the capital of South Dakota is Pierre, right in the middle of the state. It's a small town, actually. It's a very small city, slightly medium-sized town, but it's small. What he did when he was governor is he built a 14,000 square foot mansion. It's a nice little digs. So he wanted a better place to live because he's from Pierre originally. And he built a 14,000 square foot. Now, Tyler, you grew up around the Bidens. You know from nice real estate. 14,000 square foot. That's a little ostentatious, wouldn't you say?
Oh, my God. I'd like 1,400 square feet to live in, much less 14,000. Yeah, that's obscene.
Well, Jason's in Manhattan, so he lives in 4 square feet, actually. But Jason,
what 140 square feet.
Well, I was going to remind you guys that George Stephanopoulos is also a Rhodes Scholar. So he's not just a Clinton acolyte. He's part of this larger machine that is kind of, behind the whole scene there. And there's another important thing that Rounds did there. He said nobody should. What did he say? He was talking about, we want to make sure our people don't not vote because there's going to be cheating. And I haven't heard anybody say, I'm not going to vote because there was cheating. People want them to audit the existing votes. He's trying to gloss over the issue and make the issue this made-up thing that people aren't going to vote because they think there's cheating.
Yeah, exactly, and it's such a diversion of the issue, really. That's not
exactly what it is.
It's like we don't care that the elections are rigged, or that there's anomalies, or that your vote doesn't count. We still need you to come out and vote. Exactly. Because why? Because they need to have these elections ratified by some level of popular participation. Because if people in mass stopped participating, they wouldn't have their manufactured consent.
Right.
Now, Tyler, let's talk about January 6th for a little bit. That was just to get you warmed up. And we have that clip with Ted Cruz this morning questioning an FBI official. This is very interesting. This is Ted Cruz. They're, talking about January 6th. Let's hear what this FBI official said. Listen to her responses. Very interesting. Saul, hit it.
How many FBI agents or confidential informants actively participated in the events of January 6th?
Sir, I'm sure you can appreciate that I can't go into the specifics of sources and methods.
Did any FBI agents or confidential informants actively participate in the events of January 6th? Yes or no?
Sir, I can't answer that.
Did any FBI agents or confidential informants commit crimes of violence on January 6th?
I can't answer that, sir.
Did any FBI agents or FBI informants actively encourage and incite crimes of violence on January 6th?
Sir, I can't answer that.
Ms. Sadburn, who is Ray Epps?
I'm aware of the individual, sir. I don't have the specific background to him.
Okay, so does that restore your belief in democracy and freedom, Tyler, right there?
Oh, sure. The best democracy money can buy. This is a disgrace beyond. You want to talk about contempt of Congress charges that should be brought up. That agent, or whoever that was, I didn't see the actual interview. Should be absolutely brought up on contempt charges, because he didn't just talk about. And you like the language that has bled into domestic law enforcement of intelligence sources and methods. This is not some sort of foreign intrigue involving, an intelligence, the requirement for secrecy and sort of holding things back. No, this is a totally domestic issue as far as we know. It's a domestic a smear campaign being run. But they should absolutely, when he said, were any of them involved in inciting anything, insurrection, whatever have you, that should have been an absolute blanket, absolutely not answer. It should not have been, I can't answer that question. What do you mean you can't answer that question? Are you saying that you cannot attest that the FBI was not actually going in and inciting crimes in this investigation? That just, to me, that blows the credibility of the FBI right there entirely. The fact that can't be answered, and it mimics Merrick Garland's similar response. This whole, it's an active investigation nonsense. That's nonsense. They're over in the Capitol fabricating nonsense and trying to basically smear everybody and anybody who was involved, disclosing their personal texts and phone records and so forth after these phony subpoenas, which these large telecom carriers, I'm sure, couldn't bend over quickly enough to just turn it all over to the likes of Adam Schiff. And that's no problem. But the FBI, that's supposed to be, fidelity, bravery, and whatever the other one is. What is the other one? What's the I supposed to be? Integrity. Oh, supposed to be. I forgot because I haven't seen any yet in this FBI.
They changed it, Tyler. It stands for failure to begin investigations.
Yeah.
I have a serious question for you, however, because I don't disagree with what you're saying, but unlike so many people who are maybe on the right, who think this was a fantastic performance by Ted Cruz, you're a lawyer, right? I mean, Cruz knows what he's doing there. He's asking this woman questions that he knows because of her position she's going to give those answers. This is a great way for Ted Cruz to get on Fox News tonight and get a lot of people who are thinking, oh, maybe he should run in 2024 to be pro-Ted Cruz. My question, I have three questions. First of all, it sounds like that woman is on jeopardy because before she answers, it goes, dude, I don't know what's going on with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Second of all, can't the FBI afford headphones? The woman is on Zoom. And today, in 2022, when we were all on Zoom, you don't have to be that smart to recognize after 2 years of doing every phone call on video chat that if you don't have headphones, you get this boomy echo when you're not talking. And if you're going to testify in front of the Senate and you're the FBI, I hope there would be a certain level of technical sophistication there that would give us confidence in the FBI, which that performance subtly did not. And the final thing I want to say is, this is a question for you, Tyler. Does Ted Cruz have the legal authority to simply subpoena Ray Epps? And if he does, why not do that and question him under threat of contempt of Congress, where he's not an FBI agent, and get some real answers?
Yeah, that's a great question generally. If Ray Epps was not involved, I mean, or how can we say he's not involved? I mean, there's no more clear evidence.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, whispering in the ear of the supposed MAGA person before they start busting through the gates. I mean, bullhorning, or what, not bullhorning in his case, but certainly booming out. Not just we're going to go and we're going to. He didn't even say disrupt or show, send our message and we're going to protest in front. And he said we have to go into the Capitol, like a very specific physical action, because they know if they had not gone, if nobody had gone into the Capitol, none of this would be. It would be much ado about nothing. They needed people inside, and that's why they channeled the crowd in. I mean, this was a very diabolical plan. And the fact that he's not talking about, oh, we're going to go shoot up the Capitol or something. No, it's a very specific thing that he's trying to direct people to do and channel them to do. The fact that he's not subpoenaed is the fact that we have basically the Democrats in charge of Congress. Ted Cruz cannot, as far as I know, would not be able to issue any subpoenas either unilaterally, even with the minority on the Judiciary Committee. So, he would have to be the chairman to be able to get that done. And even if they were to issue those, I bet they'd be countermanded by the Senate majority.
Wow.
The Judiciary Committee majority. So, yeah, unfortunately, all they can do is really deal with. It's pretty lopsided. I mean, and more so even in the House. If you look at the way Nadler runs the committee, you had basically when Aaron Zelensky, when they were going over the Russian, trying to rehash for the umpteenth time the Russian collusion nonsense, which basically tracks this entire. If you look at this sort of model that they've adopted of just fabricating, manufacturing some sort of scandal out of thin air and then dragging it out as far as they can go and hoping that they have enough quisling Republicans to give them some sort of cover. In the case, I think, of the Russian collusion, you had Lindsey Graham, who conceded half the argument before even getting to the essential questions, which was, were the Russians hacking or involved in trying to, in any substantial or serious way, quote, hack our elections or interfere in our elections? And then the second question, was Trump involved, or was there any connection to Trump? Graham immediately had to, and this is a real problem with, again, similar politicians like Rounds and Graham, is they feel they have to concede some level of the phony argument being put forth by the left and the Democrats in order to establish some level of baseline credibility. So Graham would go on, yes, the Russians hacked our elections or tried to, interfere in our elections, but no, Donald Trump wasn't involved. It's like, give me a break. This is just, you've ceded half the argument. You've established the foundation for them to continue forward, and thus justify a Robert Mueller, frankly, as Graham couldn't have bent over backwards enough to support and defend Mueller no matter what he did, and even in the face of just outrageous persecutions and behavior by his thugs and the FBI. So, I think, unfortunately,
I've got another Rounds clip I want to play, Tyler. So give me one sec. But before I play this Rounds clip, or Saul does technically, on January 6th, one of the things that happened is there was a meeting at the Willard Hotel. Apparently, Roger Stone was there. Do you think that meeting at the Willard Hotel anything nefarious that rises to the level of Russiagate? Let's say.
Roger.
What say you?
Roger was at the. Okay, yeah, this is interesting. Roger was at the Willard Hotel. He didn't participate in any sort of meetings, though, of that sort. In fact, he didn't even know. He wouldn't have known they were going on. That was completely a separate group of people. That was the Giuliani, I think, contingent. And Roger was not privy to those or part of those at all.
Okay, that's very interesting. Okay, so let's play the second clip from Mike Rounds, because Mike Rounds kept going, and he raised an issue that I think is very important. Let's play that, Saul.
Big questions is going to be whether President Trump can run in the next election. You voted to acquit him in the impeachment trial last year, but you also said he could be prosecuted criminally. And our next guest, Congressman Raskin, has said that Congress could pass a law preventing former President Trump from running again, citing the provision of the 14th Amendment, which prohibits anyone who betrayed their oath by supporting an insurrection from holding state or federal office. He calls it a live possibility. Do you think it is?
Well, let me just share with you my thoughts on the issue in general. Every single individual in the United States is subject to the court systems. What happens with a president is that he has the shield of office, which in many cases prohibits or limits the ability of the courts to address issues surrounding that. What an impeachment does is take away that shield. President Trump was no longer president at the time that occurred. The courts are the appropriate place where those questions should be answered. This is not going to be up to members of the United States Senate or the House, in my opinion. I think this is an issue which the courts can decide, and most certainly if there's evidence there, this is going to be up to the Justice Department to bring it forward and to move with it. But once again, every single person has protections under that system. The former president has protections under that system as well. But this is something that should be decided in the courts. And I don't think it's something that we should be legislating on right now.
Now, first off, aside from the fact, as far as I know, on January 6th, let me just do the calendar here. He said that Donald Trump was not president when that occurred. But as far as I know, Donald Trump was the president of the United States on January 6th. Did I miss something? Or was he still? Well, he was still. Yeah, go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, aside from his confusing sort of half-assed answer, I mean, this is the kind of thing that it's like, again, stop helping. Stop, he gives this very sort of blow-dried politician answer instead of saying Jamie Raskin is damn near a criminal with the types of tyrannical activities that he is proposing, or essentially what would be like a bill of attainder, where the Congress can just vote that Donald Trump or others can't run for office, without any sort of actual due process. And in the case of the court, it's not the courts to decide. Like the courts, you always hear the courts. The courts, that means judges arbitrarily sitting, free from any sort of accountability, as we see in the D.C. circuit, who can opine on all kinds of, sort of endorse whatever the establishment, the deep state line is. And it's not the case that the courts would decide. It would be for a jury to decide if they convict this man and that he is guilty of the crime that is mentioned in the Constitution, which I guess rebellion, insurrection, and so forth. If he's convicted of something like that, I guess you would have a case, maybe. But, this for this wishy-washy answer, and this is not something for the legislature to, or for us to legislate at this time, as if in the future it might be possible. I mean, this is like, this is just an awful display, or I'll say, actually, it's a perfect display of the awfulness of these wishy-washy, blow-dried incumbent politicians like this guy who's been in politics his whole life, who is in a safe seat and can just basically sandbag some of the worst practices, while Jamie Raskin and his ilk, who's like the Adam Schiff of the East Coast, frankly, run amok with this lunacy. I mean, where they're going to start literally just voting or unilaterally in a one-sided partisan Congress, voting or disqualifying people from running for office or for standing for election for Congress. I mean, they don't have that power anywhere. So this was a terrible answer. Any good Republican or any good, frankly, conservative or libertarian or constitutionalist would have shot back very affirmatively in favor of the Constitution and of due process, instead of this wishy-washy establishment ball-washing answer from Senator Rounds.
So, Jason, last word from you. We're almost out of time. You got about 30 seconds. Go ahead, Jason.
I agree with what Tyler is saying. I mean, in my view, this is just presidential lawfare. We've been so softened up as a society by these plea deals and things. I mean, so you've been mentioning Roger Stone, Tyler. So in his case, they hit him like a ton of bricks with the FBI. They bust into his house. He's an aging guy. He's got a wife who's not well. There was something they did that upset her, I remember. And they put all this pressure on you, and they kick in the door on your life, and then they say, look, if you want to just agree to this, we won't stick you in jail. There's a lot of people who don't have Roger Stone's notoriety or access to the type of fundraising that he has, who would have no choice in that circumstance. And that is what we are becoming accustomed to. That's been normalized, this type of tyrannical, as Tyler said, judges just deciding. And they have broad latitude. They frequently make decisions that are contradictory to law. And unless you have the knowledge, the money, and the wherewithal to challenge that, they do whatever the hell they want.
Yeah, it's very frightening.
And if you don't have the wherewithal, and you're not willing to fold, you sit in a gulag in D.C. and run.
Right.
While they take their time bringing you to trial.
And Tyler, fantastic appearance as usual. And this is exactly why I wanted to try out this guest co-host thing, because it's nice to see two people I like talk. Jason Goodman, thanks so much. Great job as co-host. We'll talk to you next Tuesday, and we'll see you tomorrow night on our show, High Dive, on Patreon. And Tyler Nixon, great appearance as usual. You did not disappoint. You never do. And we'll be back tomorrow on the best damn radio show in the world. Bring it every day. It's The Backstory.